As South Africa restarts its nuclear build plan, critics and advocates clash over its clean energy credentials. Experts have also weighed in, calling the plan costly and wasteful. Mineral Resources and Energy Department announced last week that it planned to put the nuclear build program out to tender at the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. The department aims to complete the procurement of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power by 2024. So let's bring in Earthlife Africa Director Makoma Lekalakala now. Thank you so much for making time. Government seems to be determined to go ahead with this nuclear build plan, despite your concerns and other organizations' concerns of it being potentially costly, wasteful, taking too long to build, etc.
Good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers. And one thing is that we're surprised why government wants to go ahead by hook or crook, because this is going against the trend as the world is moving towards renewable energies. And renewable energy, it's sustainable and it avoids the carbon lock-in, so we don't exacerbate climate change. And for now, we've had around the news and some statements that NESA had actually approved the Section 34 determination by application by the minister. But the question we're asking is, why are we not getting a formal decision in the public interest that must be based on facts and evidence as to how NESA came to this decision? We need a legal and factual basis for the decision, and it must be formalized, it must be written down. And this comes at a backdrop that we've had so many times that different ministers had actually said that South Africa would afford nuclear at a pace and scale that country can afford. And I'm wondering if a repetition of that statement will make nuclear affordable, because we cannot afford nuclear economically and environmentally. And the way to go is renewable energy, a greater investment in renewable energy technologies. The integrated resource plan policy does not even say that nuclear procurement should commence now. The Electricity Government Act explicitly says that any new electricity generation must be a low-cost option, and nuclear, it's not low cost. And we've had statements that we can only afford it at, we can only go nuclear or procure nuclear at a pace and scale that we can afford, but we cannot do that currently.
Mr. Kalakala, you're talking about the transparency that is needed from NESA on how it got to this decision. And the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy announced on Friday that it planned to, in fact, put they plan to put the program out to tender at the end of the 2021-2022 financial year. The question now is how transparent that process is going to be and what mechanisms are in place to avoid the process being rigged and littered with corruption.
Yeah, how does the Department of Minerals and Resources announce that they're going to put out tenders or requests for information, whilst the National Energy Regulator has actually even given out a formal public statement on the decision that they have come to on the Section 34 that the minister had applied for. And we know that the nuclear, particularly nuclear energy, is riddled with corruption and is riddled with secrecy, and that's not in the spirit of what is laid down in the South African Constitution. But however, no matter how much can be said that the minister is doing that, the minister is planning to do that. We know that nuclear, it's not low carbon. Nuclear, it's not a transitional technology. It's really high carbon intensive. And it seems like these announcements by the minister, I'm not sure in which country he lives in, because we have just submitted as South Africa the nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement, which states that South Africa will put in place or is putting in place mitigation system to realize opportunities for a low carbon economy, while being mindful that an inclusive just transition requires time. But that time, we should be using it, the minister should be using it by not going ahead with this high carbon intensive project. He should actually consider low carbon and climate resilient technology like renewable energy. This is actually, that is why I ask myself a question: if the minister is alive to the country's plan, or the DMRE is just a standalone department within the whole institutional governance of South Africa.
Well, government will argue that we've always been consistent in that we want to explore all options. I mean, they announced earlier this year 8 preferred bidders. All right, it was 8 preferred bidders who will be producing independent power. This essentially paves the way for about 2,000 megawatts of emergency power to meet the short-term electricity supply gap. So what they're saying is it's not like we're not going for renewable energy. Here we are. We've announced the plans around renewable energy. We just want to explore all options, including nuclear.
All options, including nuclear, but nuclear should not be an option because it's not low carbon. The other IPPs are that of renewable energy technologies, and nuclear is not part of that, it's not included, and we know all that nuclear is very dirty, it's expensive, and it's economically we can't afford it. So it's a no option, and that is something that the country should not even look at. The National Development Plan said we could only think about considering nuclear by 2030. It's not yet 2030, so by 2030 we have to take material conditions on the ground based on what is there. But still, nuclear would not even be one of the options, because according to the Electricity Generation Act, nuclear, the nuclear fuel chain doesn't put it as part of the low cost option because of its externalized cost, particularly on waste and the cost economically.
So what you are suggesting then is take all the money, put it in renewable energy instead of putting some of it into this program, which is going to only add even additional capacity to the grid later in the future, even apart from some of the concerns that you've raised.
Considering the climate crisis that we are in, we should not, and as a country, we have taken a decision that we would not actually generate electricity from the high carbon intensive or the more polluting electricity option like coal, like nuclear. That should not be considered at all. What we're saying is that there are alternatives to coal, there are alternatives to nuclear, and those should be considered rather than putting our money into a technology that is actually going to have much more externalized costs, and also which is not low carbon, which is actually going to exacerbate the climate crisis that we find ourselves in.